Welcome to Nitpicking Nerds Guide on Mana Rocks.
Today we're going to show you why mana rocks.
I'm your host, Joe Cherries.
I'm your host, Beezy, and that makes us the Nitpicking Nerds. Do you enjoy ramping out? You couldn't do it without us, so I think you at least owe us a subscription.
He's right. And besides, you want to be subscribed to this channel because our subscribers are 10% more likely to rock.
Disclaimer here. The Nitpicking Nerds want you to rock, but you probably won't rock.
Isn't that something?
What do you say on turn 2? Or you're about to draw your second card. You don't have anything to do on turn 2. But you're what are you looking to draw? You say, no, I don't know if you I want to rock.
Oh, I was thinking like you have Cage Sun, right? Okay. And then you have 4 mana rocks next to it. Mm-hmm. So then the second one in is the third rock from the sun. That's what I was thinking of.
Also a good one.
All right, on topic.
So what is a mana rock?
Yeah. Well, first, what are we doing? Both an existential crisis question and a video topic starter.
Wow. And the existential crisis thing, I have no idea. And in the sense of the video, we're talking about mana rocks. We're talking about things that tap for mana, artifacts. They come down and they can produce mana in some way or another.
Yeah, so
we're not talking about things that filter mana. Like if you put 1 mana into it and it puts 1 mana out, that's filtering. That isn't a mana rock in our definition. Our definition is a artifact that taps for mana.
Right. It produces mana for no mana, basically. Whatever. You get the idea. You'll know it when you see it. But we're going to go over the best ones, sort of the traps, what we expect from each different cost, which ones you really want to avoid. So let's get into it. So we're going to start off by talking about what are our expectations for a mana rock, and then what are sort of the standards at each given cost. Yeah.
So expectations / standards. Mana rocks come at all costs. You can get a mana rock that costs 6 mana, costs 7 mana, but it better be doing something pretty extreme. We want ones that you can play early so they can ramp you into the big spells late game. Those ones are much more important. If they're on the low end of the cost, that means that you get to put them out early and use them more often to generate more mana. So if you play a mana rock on turn 1, and let's just say, I don't know, that doesn't really exist. You play a mana rock on turn 1 and it taps for 1 mana. Now every turn you're generating 1 mana. So it pays
itself back
very quickly.
You can't ramp into more ramp. Commander's a game usually on turn 10. We're into like haymaker swinging game territory where like you got to have answers for stuff. So you want to ramp out the first like 4 or 5 turns, but when you're on turn 6, you can't be like, and now my new mana rocks. Everyone's gonna be like, who cares?
Yeah, unless your deck has a way to take advantage of that, which is
well, yeah. Sometimes mana rocks are, but in general, this is gonna be. We're gonna say this basically right now and then never again. So please listen to this statement. This is in general, not counting niche situations, and we're not really taking budget into consideration.
Yes, we're not taking budget into consideration. If you take budget into consideration, some of these rocks get a boost, but we're not trying to talk about that right now. There's great budget mana rocks. That's a whole nother video where you can talk about the ones on a budget that you should play.
I have a deck. I want to build the best version of the deck that I can within reason, right? And here are the mana rocks that I may or may not want.
Yeah, I want to build an 80 to 90% deck, I'd say. That's probably more appropriate. We don't want to build a EDH deck, but we want to build what we do here in the Nitpicking Nerds, semi-competitive, like 90% range.
Yeah, 90. If CDH is 100, then we're at like 90. So cheap mana rocks, another thing they're doing is they're helping you double spell so that if it's turn 2, you can even go like 2 mana rock and then tap it to play something else, which is why we like our mana rocks to generally enter the battlefield untapped.
Yeah, mana rocks coming in untapped is a huge thing because they get you a use right away, which means they essentially cost less mana to play on that turn.
Ooh, and another thing that we're only going to say once, green decks, we're basically not talking about those. They almost never want mana rocks.
Yes, there are exceptions to that rule. We don't have to list all the exceptions.
This video will never end if we go over exceptions to everything.
Yeah, we're just not going to play. In general, if we're building a green deck, we're not going to play mana rocks.
Right, we're painting with broad strokes to get the point across.
So the mana rock priority list, we're starting at 0 and 1 mana artifacts.
What do we expect?
We talk about soul rings in this area, mana crypts, chrome mox, chrome diamond. These cards are extremely good.
Chrome diamond,
mox diamond.
Yeah, all the moxen, mox opal, they're all insane. They're mostly broken. There's a couple that we can maybe get into later, but more or less if you have it, you're going to play it and feel pretty good about it.
These cards are extremely good, and if your deck is trying to be very, very strong, when you're pushing towards that 100%, these become even better. Soul Ring is just almost an auto-include. If you have Mana Crypt, it's pretty much an auto-include if you have it.
They're like the best cards in Commander. I think they're some of the best cards in Magic, so there's really no reason to exclude Soul Ring or Mana Crypt. Those jump over even into green decks easily.
Yeah, those ones fit in green decks, but obviously not the average one.
Right, so 2 is where we get more realistic. Now
yes.
We're expecting, like, this is where most of them fall. They're really efficient at 2, and I find that, really efficient at 2, and then at 1, it's like insane. It's way more efficient than at 2, and then at 3, it falls off. But we're talking about 2. Most common, you're going to find like your Arcane Signets, your Talismans, your regular Signets. They just come out, they're going to fix your mana, they're going to enter untapped mostly.
Yep.
And the 2 is the sweet spot where you want the most of them.
And you can use them right away. So all we want the ones that come in untap. We said there are things
we'll talk about more later.
We're going to talk about more.
This is just
later.
general. We're not going over specifics.
2 mana rocks that come in untap tend to be very strong because they repay you 1 of the mana right away. So they essentially cost you 1 mana to play. Of course, on turn 2, if you play a Signet, you won't be able to activate it because it does. You need to put a mana. This is a mana filter that is also a rock in our definition because it produces an extra mana.
It creates mana, basically, but just not by itself. Either way, Signets are amazing because while they don't produce mana by themselves, they fix mana and they can turn a colorless into 2 colors, which is ridiculous. How about 3 mana rocks?
These need to tap for 2+, and they really need to have a relevant second ability in your deck.
So they tap for 2+ and or have a relevant like static ability or activated ability.
So what are some examples of ones that you would play?
Well, really, just one quick example, because we've got plenty more examples, is War and Power Stone. It enters tapped, but does make 2. So that's one of the ones that's like pretty much worth it.
If you need to know how good Soul Ring is, look at Warren Power Stone and look that it's a playable card and say,
wow.
This
Ring, huh?
This costs 2 more mana than Soul Ring and enters tapped.
Soul Ring actually costs -1 mana.
Yep.
So it costs 4 more than Soul Ring.
Yeah, pretty insane, actually.
Yeah. So at 4 mana, okay, now we are really not going to cut it for tapping for just 2. Some cases there's cards I like that do it, but I want 3 or more mana and or a super cool activated ability. Thran Dynamo is kind of the standard for this, where it comes down, it really only costs you 1.
Yeah.
So it doesn't feel too bad.
And I would actually avoid Thran Dynamo can also fall into something that we mentioned later, which is going to be traps. It can fall into the trap category because if you're playing a 3-4 color deck and colorless mana and you have a lot of pips in your deck, you want to be careful with something like Thran Dynamo because it does make colorless.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Maybe you want to stick to like, the red or the blue decks with that one. 5+. I'm basically just going to say avoid these unless you're an artifact deck or you're some corner case that I'm sure you'll know it when you're in it, where you're like, I want every mana rock ever. But this is where you have Gilded Lotus, Dreamstonehedron, which we'll talk about, and even the newest card, Chromatic Orrery.
Yeah, there's some.
It's a 7 mana rock.
There's some decks that want Chromatic Orrery.
Definitely, sure.
They definitely exist. I'm just saying, if you're building a deck, don't just say I open Chromatic Orrery in my pre-release pack.
Right.
I want to jam this. Don't just jam it. Find the right deck for it.
Yeah, I'd say what mana. If the question is what mana rocks do I want to play, Chromatic Orrery is not even in the list of like, hey, what should I be looking at?
Yeah, Chromatic Orrery is a card you look at based on your commander. Your commander says, I'm 5 colors, and I love having 70 mana on my mana pool.
Yeah, like
then
a Gigantha or something.
Yeah,
you just have 1 million mana to tap Orrery. But okay, now that we got the priorities out of the way, you kind of know what we're looking for.
So we're going to talk about our favorites here. Our favorite mana rocks, we put in a lot of decks, and we'll explain why we like them, what they do differently than other mana rocks. Obviously, when I talk about like Signets here, they're very good. When I talk about Talismans, those are staples, and they're great, but we're going to talk about the ones that like might not be in every deck, and we'll talk about why and where we like them.
Yeah, they're in the corner case, or why like they fit into what we just talked about. Like, what do we want at 0, 1, 2, 3? So the first one, I guess we'll each take one because some of these are mine and some of these are Joe's.
Sure.
I like Everflowing Chalice Slot. It's a 0 mana artifact, and it has multi-kicker 2, so you can pay 2 any number of times when you cast it, and then it enters with a charge counter for each time you kick it, and now it taps for mana equal to the number of charge counters on it. The reason I like this so much is that it's a bad mana rock at every point other than 2, but there's some points where you can cast this thing for like, the versatility of it makes it so strong. You can cast it for 8, and it pays you back 4 right away, so 2 taps and you're paid off. And the fact that it's counters and they stay, you just add on, slowly proliferate, add them, double them, whatever, and then this is insane. It's like one of the best cards in your deck.
Yeah, this deck you want to fit, or this card you want to fit into the right deck. You want to put it in monocolored decks. I often love this card because you don't need a lot of restrictions on color. You often like maybe 2-color decks if you have proliferate, ways to use the charge counters. Maybe if you want big mana, if you really want to store up your mana for the next turn, this is also a great card for a deck like that.
Competitive decks that just want to jam a million 2-mana rocks. This is one of the better 2-mana rocks because sometimes it's a 4-mana rock.
It's a great 2-mana rock, and like again, any extra mana can just go into it. If you want to think about it this way, it also only costs basically because it always costs 1 more to kick basically. So basically, 2 you get 1 mana, 4 you get 2 mana. Now it costs you 2 mana basically. Then you get 6. Now it costs you 3 mana. But if colorless is if colors aren't a factor, then that's true. But
right,
obviously colors can be a factor.
And there's even times where I've cast this for 0. Oh, you get a draw trigger or something. Like the fact that you can just do nothing with it and have it be useless and trigger some stuff is even extra relevant.
Yeah,
it's just another thing you can do with it.
Yeah, if you're playing something like an artifact that plays like KCI, then you can just play it, get one of your triggers off one of your money artifact triggers because you're playing an artifact deck. Maybe you want to play it for 0 and exchange it with Goblin Welder with something in your graveyard. Like
draw a card
Blightsteel
off
Colossus.
Joyra. Let's just talk independent of one another for 5 minutes about what casting a spell might get you.
There's a million things.
I was thinking if this is like a movie, we would do that. I'll let you do the next one.
The next one is Mindstone. It's 2 mana for an artifact that taps for 1, or you can pay 1 and tap it, sacrifice it to draw a card. Again, this is basically Everflowing Chalice for 2, but it also has the added ability of going into late game. You can just draw a card when you no longer need this ramp because maybe you're on like 7-8 lands. You're just like, well, I really need a powerful spell. I really hope I draw one on with this.
There's not too many mana rocks that are never dead. This is never a bad draw. It's either 3 mana replaces itself. I mean, that could obviously be better. But how many mana rocks just say, oh, you drew me and it wasn't that great? Okay, draw another card.
Yeah.
Try again. It's amazing. It's sweet.
Yeah, it is. You can just try again. And it's a 2-mana rock that comes in untapped. We talk about why we like those. They're great in many situations. You want them to come in untapped on turn 2 so you can ramp into your 4s, your 5s, your 6s, and really get going because EDH has a lot of big spells. And even if you're not playing a deck with a lot of big spells, you want a double spell.
You kind of touched on this, but I like to bring it up again. Like the mana rocks that make colorless, probably just avoid them in 3+ color decks.
Yeah. If
you want to focus more on like signets and other stuff, but I'll let you go to the next one.
The next one is Thought Vessel. This is a 2-mana rock that says you have no maximum hand size and it taps for 1 colorless mana. This one is just gravy.
Yeah, there's the gravy boat.
It's gravy, and there's not a better word for it because it's just bonus because it's already a decent rock. Kind of just it's gravy in the way that Mindstone's draw is also gravy for that card. It's a decent rock. It makes 1 mana. It only basically costs you 1 because it taps right away. And
well, this is a fringe card. It goes in decks where you want a huge hand size. But when you have it, it's better than Reliquary Tower. It's better than like Spellbook or most of the other effects it's better than that say you don't maximum hand size because those cards tend to suck.
Yeah, this is a colorless rock, as we mentioned earlier, so we don't want to put it in too many 3-4 color decks. But again, in mono blue, where you can draw a million cards, this card is great.
Oh, yeah. It ramps you to Blue Sun Zenith, and then the extra mana you spent gives you extra cards, which don't go away. If you don't discard, this thing has literally drawn you cards.
Yes, it has gotten you card advantage from doing that. But don't confuse that because, like, there are in some decks, you don't want to just jam as many of these effects as possible because, like, I think Venture's Journal is an absolutely awful card.
Oh, that card is so bad.
I don't think
it's basically useless, especially with the creation of Thought Vessel. But we can move on to Hedron Archive, which is a 4-mana rock. It taps for 2 Wingdings. You pay 2, tap, and sack it to draw 2 cards. This is just 2 Mind Stones stapled together exactly. We talked about where this fits in the criteria. It's a 4-mana rock, so it either has to add 3 mana or have a really cool static, and I think it has the activated ability of drawing 2 for just 2, which is, I think that's pretty good rate, honestly.
It's a perfectly fine rate.
It's right in the middle because I think we'll talk about the next one up from this, and like Mind Stone's really good. The one above this is really bad, and I think this one is like right in the middle where I don't put it in every deck or every deck that wants an artifact. But there's some decks I've been more than happy to play this.
Yeah, it just depends on how good your card draw is, how good your card selection is. That's where this comes down to. Do you really need to? If you're playing this on 4, are you really ramping into something sweet for 6 or 7 next turn?
Well, this is like red decks, white decks, and colorless decks. Like want this all day long.
Yeah, I mean colorless decks. Colorless decks. This is like
one of the better
get in my
ones.
deck.
It's like top 15.
Yeah, you want this card in your deck. Next one, Coalition Rock. I love this one. This is a 3-mana rock that taps for a color, any color mana, and then you can tap it to put a charge counter on it, and on the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, you remove all the charge counters, and you get any color mana equal to the number of charge counters removed this way.
Not only is it a 3-mana rock that taps for 2 functionally the first time? You just charge it up, and then it'll tap for 2 next turn. That already fits our criteria, but you can also build up the charge counters same way as Everflowing Chalice, and it makes any color twice, so it can like make green-white or blue-red.
Yeah, you get to choose what turn you want to use it twice. Basically, it's always going to give you 1 mana no matter what, because the first turn it comes out, you can choose not to use it and then put the charge counter so you get that next turn. And then if you really need all the mana, you throw it all in, or you just save the charge counter for next turn and it just makes 1 mana a turn.
Yeah, random proliferate. Okay, it'll tap for 3 next turn, functionally.
Yeah. Also, a cool little my favorite little combo with is Seedborn Muse.
Oh, that's sweet. You just keep putting charge counters.
On everybody's turn, you put a charge counter on it. So when it's your turn, you get like 3 mana off it.
Yeah, 3 off of the trigger.
Or it's 4 because
3 off the trigger, it taps for 1.
It's sweet. I love this card so much.
That's really cool. Speaking of 3-mana rocks that have charge counters that happen every turn that you can proliferate, it's Midnight Clocks. 2 and a blue for an artifact that taps for a blue. So it's 3 mana, taps for 1. Hold on. There's that ability you're going to expect by now. 2 and a blue, put an hour counter on it. Every upkeep, you also put an hour counter. And then when there's 12, you remove them all, exile this thing, chuck it into a river, and then you shuffle your graveyard and hand in to your library, and then draw 7 cards.
Yeah, so this card is really going to get you a fresh 7 after it goes off. It produces mana for a few turns, 5. It can if you play it on turn 3, it can do it for a ton of turns. This thing goes off really quick in EDH because it's each upkeep. So it only takes 3 full goes around the table for this thing to trigger, go off, and you get to draw the fresh 7. Which means you can just empty your hand as fast as possible and just throw out all your resources. And then with all your extra mana that you have laying around, put counters on this to get it to go even faster.
This card is great, and I haven't really gotten to put it in a deck because I don't have a deck that like wants this that badly. But I almost want to build one because it's so. I'll draw 5 cards with my mana rock. I paid 3 mana. It netted itself back. It produced all 3 that I spent on it, maybe more. And now, okay, I'm just gonna draw 7. I had 2 cards in my hand, but now I have 7.
Yeah, I like this card a lot. I think it belongs in a lot of different decks. Depending
Belongs
on
in a museum.
Like definitely, I think it belongs in decks that really want to use their resources quick and like just kind of throw their cards out. Like I want to play everything out of my hand quick, and then Midnight Clock will just draw me a fresh 7 after that, which is something that not a lot of mana rocks will do. Actually, I would say almost no mana rocks.
Like that is the biggest upside on any mana rock I've ever seen. Not that this is like broken, but just in terms of like what a mana rock does for no mana, it's pretty crazy.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's only 4 turns on the table.
0 investment.
Just hope it doesn't get. It might get swept from the board wipe, which is fine. You can't. Dice removal isn't a good argument, but if it gets swept from the board, hey, whatever. This isn't a huge target. I mean, it only becomes a target once it's at like 10 counters. But even then, you could just leave up 6 mana. So it's like someone targets, it's like, okay, I'll activate, and now it goes off. Last one is Coveted Jewel. I absolutely love Coveted Jewel. It is a 6 mana artifact, and when it enters, you draw 3 cards, and it taps for 3 mana of any color. But there's a little caveat. If somebody attacks you with creatures and one of them is unblocked, they gain control of the Coveted Jewel, and then they draw 3 cards and they untap the Coveted Jewel.
That's a lot of card draw. If you've got ways to like sacrifice it, to take it back multiple times, this kind of becomes, it's like a weird 6 mana draw 6, make 6 mana, and then somebody else draws 3 and makes 3 mana. It's really weird.
You can, I mean, even then, it's like this also adds what I really like about this card more than anything is it adds an extra layer to the game of Magic.
Right.
And
it's like the Monarchy.
Yes, exactly like the Monarchy, where it's like there's this extra layer of attacking, there's this extra layer of politics, and that's what makes EDH so much fun is that it's not just this one-on-one game where
there's no objectives.
The whole objective is just win the game. There is 0 other objective. There is 0 other
I meant like
ways.
Objectivity. There's way less objectivity. Like that was strictly wrong. It's like, well, no, because I made a deal with him.
Yeah,
it's like that. You can't factor that. There's no algorithm for that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I agree with what you're saying also, but also what I was saying was right too.
So lastly, but not leastly, we have traps.
Uh-oh.
Which basically just means, hey, we've played with these or experienced these, or based on our criteria for like what we think a card should be, I would avoid all of these mostly.
And I would like to mention right away that because I just want to re-mention it. We said we're going to mention it. Budget is not being taken into account for these. I know some of these are expensive, but the cheap ones, someone will be like, but I have tons of these in my budget deck. It's like, yeah, if it's your budget deck,
that's great.
Your deck costs $50 and that was your goal for the deck. That's fine. Because these things, like, obviously a quarter card gains a ton of value for a budget deck.
Right. It's like there is an objective like best thing when your budget is $1. Well, I can tell you the best mana rock for $1, but we're just talking about the best mana rocks. So the first one we have on Trap City here is the Diamond Cycle. They're like, let's talk about, I think it's Pearl Diamond. The enters tapped, costs 2, makes a white. And there's 1 for each color.
Yep. These are just, these is There's more. There's a lot like this. They enter tapped and they tap for 1 mana. The trouble is they come in tapped. They don't do anything the first turn. If they get your mana back, it takes 2 full turns every single time.
Yeah, if you want to talk about just like this, the cards aren't even that bad, I don't think. But the problem is there's 30 mana rocks that are better than them, and then the bottom 10 of those don't even make decks. So I don't see how these would.
The main issue is they enter tapped more than anything.
Right,
on
like,
these
oh,
hits.
you're a red-blue deck. Okay, well, you've got Is It Signet, you've got Arcane Signet, you've got Felwar Stone that you could play over this, you got Thought Vessel, you can play Mind Stone. It's like, well, now how many 2 mana rocks do you want? Because Fire Diamond probably isn't going to make it. You can even play Sapphire Medallion and Fire Medallion over this.
If these enter untapped, they're really good. Let's be clear about that because these move up to like Signet levels and
Yeah,
Talisman
they do
levels.
become that, but entering tapped and also not having any abilities just kind of pushes them below a lot of stuff.
Exactly. Entering tapped is such a huge downside. It's so big. Like I can't overstate how big entering tapped is. It's just like when we've talked about lands in the past. It's the same concept. It puts you a whole turn behind. It stops you from potentially double spelling. There's so many things that a rock or a land entering tap can prevent you from doing.
We can maybe talk about that some other time. But we got Pillar of Origins next. This card probably doesn't even see that much play. I just want to talk about it. It's 2 mana for an artifact. Enters battlefield, chooses creature type, and then it adds a mana, but only for the creature type of any color. I think this card's terrible. I think it's like unplayable. This is weird to me because you could just play creature spells that are this cost 1 less, and then that card has another ability tacked onto it, or some creature, or some land. It's so not worth it. It's not the type. Like, it's not a dragon, so it won't trigger anything for dragons. It doesn't add mana for anything that's not a dragon. Why do you want this thing?
You know what? I was thinking in my head, I would play this in my Umori creature deck, but it's not a creature, so I can't. So this card stinks.
It's just, here's the issue, right? Pillar of Origins doesn't actually give you an upside. It just says a mana of any color for this tribe. So the upside is any color. So if I'm like mono red dragons, this is worse than every other thing that just comes in, like Arcane Signet, or just makes a mana.
I mean, Thought Vessel's better. Even
Right.
though
Mind Stone, it has no abilities, doesn't do anything. It just makes a mana. So this just becomes worse. It needed to say, like, whenever this mana is spent to cast a creature spell, like Scry 1 or something, then we'd be, like, more in the discussion.
It would be cool. Whenever you cast, say, like, you name dragons, and then you cast a dragon, you get, like,
Or an untaps.
a colored mana.
Cast a dragon, like,
Untap.
That would be sweet.
Untap is the same thing. I was saying get a mana. That's, same exact thing. That's way more usable. That's way better. That's just a playable card. It doesn't even sound broken.
Maybe,
It sounds very good.
It goes infinite with any 1 mana thing that bounces itself.
Sure, but there's not.
Whatever. Okay.
That's not
this
really.
Is a fake card that doesn't exist.
Is that what we're worried about? Because that card sounds just playable. Next is Chromatic Lantern. Avoid this in 1, 2 color decks. 3 color decks, you can consider it, but unless you're very color intensive, I wouldn't use it. 4 and 5 color decks, those are really where you want it, because in 4 and 5 color decks, Chromatic Lantern actually starts having very, very relevant text where you're fixing your mana, and it's very prevalent to your deck, as opposed...
If all your lands tap for 1 extra color than they would have, that is not a good static ability on a 3 mana rock that only makes 1. We said that we wanted to make 2 or have a good static. I don't think the static is all that interesting. It's not even as good of a static as Dryad of the Elysian Grove, aka Naked Dryad Boy, where he actually says, now all your lands are all types, so you can trigger like Valakut a bunch of times.
Yeah.
It doesn't even have that. It's just they make any color.
And he also gives you extra land drop. That card's way better.
Well, yeah, he's not a mana rock.
Yeah, that guy, if he was a mana rock, I would play him.
He's an enchantment.
I mean, oh my god, he'd be such a good mana rock. If he was
Colorless?
if he was an enchantment and not a creature, that card would be so good.
You mean if he was an artifact?
If he was an artifact or an enchantment, I'm saying
He is an enchantment.
Well, okay, if he's not a creature, if you remove the type creature from Dryad of the Elysian Grove, that card gets such a huge boost because it doesn't just get swept up in board wipes. That card is so good.
Okay, we're literally talking more about fake cards that don't exist.
Yeah.
On every single bullet.
It's cool.
So we'll get to the next one. These are possibly traps. There's Basalt Monolith, 3 mana artifact, taps for 3, pay 3 to untap it. Grim Monolith, 2 mana, taps for 3, pay 4 to untap it. And Mana Vault, 1 mana, taps for 3, pay 4 on your upkeep to untap it, or it deals with damage to you.
Yep.
Why do we have these as sometimes traps?
Because if you have the way to untap these, then they just become weird rituals. Or if you don't have ways to untap them, then another reason these become traps is if you don't have ways to really cast huge spells, they're going to be so impactful, it won't matter that now you've lost like 3 or 4 mana.
So like Maelstrom Wanderer does not care. They want to play Mana Vault on turn 1 and then play Maelstrom Wanderer on like turn 3. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter that we did it because those 3 extra turns were huge. Same with Basalt and Grim, or Basalt Monolith and Grim Monolith have like infinite combos you can do. That's way different. Artifact decks that are untapping and tapping these, totally want them. But random mono black deck, maybe you don't want Mana Vault.
Yeah, I wouldn't. If I'm playing a random deck,
Would you play Dark Ritual? No, it's the same thing.
No.
If you're never going to untap it.
Yeah, because you're basically never going to untap it because you're just not going to have the extra mana laying around. And when you do untap it, now
You lose all that advantage. You just take a huge tempo, like you just take a turn off.
a tempo. What is that called? It's a tempo black hole.
Yeah, we like to say tempo black hole.
A tempo black. That's what Uros should be, but it's not. But yeah, all these cards can be a tempo black hole if you start untapping them without getting any advantage off it. Because now you're not even generating mana. You're just doing a weird like move my mana to my next turn.
Yeah, I'll skip. It's like skipping. The way overextended like analogies. Skip my turn and then have 2 turns or something.
Yeah,
What's the point of that? Just take turns normally. Next up is a card that I love, but I don't think is very good. It's Commander Sphere. It's 3 mana for a thing that produces 1 of any color of your commander's color identity, and you can sack it, not tap it, just sack it whenever to draw a card.
I only feel like this is a trap for certain reasons because I feel like it just ends up with too many decks. I think this card is fine, and I think it definitely has homes in certain decks, especially when you want to be like say sacking an artifact and get you an advantage, or an artifact coming in and give you an advantage. But I just feel like it's not an auto include. This is not something. This isn't it isn't two. Look at your 2 mana rock slot. Fill your 2 mana rock slot out. Then maybe especially I like Commander Sphere, especially if you're in 2 or 1 color, because then you start falling into like, okay, I don't need producing any color is not that important, but I don't have that many 2 mana rocks because like I don't get signets in 1 color.
You don't get talismans.
You don't get talismans in 1 color, and then you go into 2 colors and you get those, but you start running out. If you need a bunch of them, you start going to 3.
Yeah, so red white, that's fine. You can't really play it in colorless because it won't tap for mana. So I like Commander Sphere, but I think stick to budget mostly.
Yeah, exactly. I don't even think 6 to budget. I think 1 and 2 color decks is where it belongs, honestly. Because as soon as you get to 3 colors, there's so many 2 mana rocks in 3 colors. It's insane. Actually,
it just gets pushed into like not even close to playability. This next one is a weird card that I think honestly we don't even really consider a mana rock. I look at this card and maybe we're wrong, right? But I think this is one of the worst cards I've ever seen that I see played quite a bit. It's Gemstone Array. It's 4 mana artifact, and then you can pay 2, put a charge counter on it, and then you can remove a charge counter and add a mana of any color to your mana pool. Am I missing something? Or is this, like, to me at least, this card looks horrible.
Yeah, this is going to be the one in the comments that someone's going to say nobody plays, but it's like...
I'd love to talk about it. I'm just, like, confused because I get that you can proliferate the counter, but this card by itself will literally never pay itself back ever.
Yeah,
I don't... 6 mana to get 1, and then it's 8 to get 2? This feels like skip your turn, take 2 turns later.
What about 10? If I put 10 mana into it.
You get... What, 3?
That's pretty bad.
What? That is just like joke numbers to me. So unless you're some like hyper insane infinite combo proliferate deck, don't even think about it.
I don't see this card at all being in any decks. But we've seen it, and I just want to say don't play it because I don't even know the deck that it goes in. I don't have a deck off the top of my head, but maybe you have one. Maybe there definitely might be some. There's always exceptions to the rule. I don't know what the exception is in this case, so I'm just going to say there's no exceptions.
Like once you have like Winding Constrictor. Then you pay 2 mana to make 2 mana, but that doesn't really get you anywhere. Then you need to make it produce an additional, then it goes infinite. Okay, moving on. Dreamstonehedron is one we talked about. That is the next step up. There's Mindstone for 2, and there's Hedron Archive for 4, and then there's Dreamstonehedron for 6, which produces 3. And you can pay 3 and tap, sack it to draw 3. Too far. Sorry, 2. You crossed. I don't know where the line is, but you crossed it because I'm not paying 6 mana for a rock that makes 3.
Well, we mentioned 5 plus mana rocks are ones we just don't want to play. And
we want our 5 rocks to tap for 3. I don't even think Guild Lotus is that great. And this is way worse than that.
Yeah, I mean, the problem with Guild Lotus mainly is that it costs 5 mana. I mean, it can pay itself back in 2 turns if you get the go-arounds, but it also draws a big target if you're a deck that's going to be casting huge spells.
Yeah.
The card is perfectly fine and reasonable, Dreamstonehedron, but again, I don't know. You have to be in specific decks.
Colorless, maybe still just you play it anyway because I know the colorless pool is way lighter than everything else.
Well, yeah, I mean, literally, you have to play cards that have 0 colors. Most Magic cards have a color.
Right. You don't get the talismans. You don't get the signets. You don't even get the diamonds.
Yeah, you don't even get the charcoal diamond.
No,
not charcoal diamond, my favorite diamond.
Okay, there's only one. This is all the same card. There's only one of them. One card left to talk about, but there's like 30 of them. This is 3 mana artifact cycle. They tap to add 1, 2, or 3 colors, and they're bad. We have the banners, the crystals, the clue stones, the obelisks, the monuments, and the key runes, and also the lockets.
There's so many of these. There's 3 mana Manorex that come down and basically just produce 1 mana. They sometimes produce 3 different colors, 2 different colors.
Some of them draw a card in a weird way that you don't really care about that much.
Yeah, like the Cluestones crack in weird ways, but the best ones,
the banners do too.
The best ones the ones that we like the most are lockets, which you can pay 4 and sack them to draw 2 cards, which is pretty awesome to replace them with 2 cards way down the line after you use them. Best for budget.
If you're in a budget, I think these lockets are actually just great. Like if you're on a budget, these are like the best mana rocks you can have.
Also, if you're on a budget, I think crystals are great.
Crystals are good too because they just cycle. So if you don't want a mana rock, you just cycle it.
Yeah.
So it's like lockets, super amazing. Like I'm such a big fan of them for budget. And then crystals, hey, you got some Ikoria cards. Then you don't want to like break the bank or buy cards. Use your crystals.
Yep. And if we're not talking about budget, don't play any of these. Get them out of your deck. Don't even think about them because
they're all worse than Chromatic Lantern, and we don't like that. So I mean, they're below this card that you need to find an excuse to play anyway. So I just don't bother.
Yeah, just don't play these. Don't play them anywhere except budget. Budget is the exception.
And even then, avoid all of the ones with no text and stick to the lockets or crystals.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Okay, that's a lot of tips. I feel like we just threw out like 100,000 tips at people. So let's just let them cool down for 5 minutes. We'll just talk about plugs.
So special shout outs to all of our patrons. We love you all as much as we can without making you uncomfortable. You guys are the greatest. You're the poopy babies. Nitpicking Nerds fans are aka the poopy babies. If you would like to become a poopy baby and join them and support us monthly, you can go to patreon.com using the link in the description below.
Speaking of links in the description, you can go to the TCG player link we have below, which is where the description is. If you haven't watched a YouTube video before, click on the link, navigate where you want, buy what you want, and then we get a kickback on the order.
Yep. So that's pretty awesome. We do love kickback.
And if you love seeing Joe and sometimes never me, you can go to twitch.com/nitpickingnerds. Check out him streaming from 10 to 4 weekdays Eastern Standard Time, and I won't be there probably.
Where would that link be?
It's in the description.
Where's the description?
I lost track.
It's below.
Oh, good call. Good call. Nice one. That's why there's 2 of us.
Yeah. So why is there a tidbit about our life? I meant to say, what's the tidbit about our life? Not why is there one?
Well, we got to cop out last time and talk about how we have a new studio. Maybe the tidbit is that we're getting more stuff for the studio.
We've already said that.
Unless you have something.
We literally said that last episode.
I think that was me, so you got to come up with it.
Oh, come on. Getting really hyped because this Friday is Paper Mario the Thousand Year Door, or not the Thousand. Paper Mario Origami King. The combat is questionable, and we'll see if it's fun. We're gonna play.
Already use this as a thing.
But I'm excited. It's getting closer, so I'm gonna keep using it.
It's gonna be the first video game I played in like 2 years, so
we'll see if it's good.
Like the first new video game, maybe the first new video game I've played in like 7 years. I don't know. I don't play video games.
I mean,
which just which ostracizes me from like those nerds who just sit down and play video games, and I'm like, I can't talk to you about anything.
I play few and far between video games. I play some, but not as many.
You couldn't talk to like the COD players about anything. Like I have no idea.
Oh, I have no clue what they're talking about.
I feel like a mom. I don't know.
No, they're always talking about it feels like the COD and the Fortnite players are always talking about. The toughest part about it is if you don't keep up with it, it's really hard because they always talk about the newest patch and how it ruined the game.
The DLC.
No, not the DLC. Just how the newest patch ruined the game every time. They always ruin.
Maybe is that the one with the kill streaks? I'm sorry, Jimmy. I don't know.
Literally so every time I talk to a Fortnite player, the newest patch is the worst thing that's happened to the game.
How many 12-year-olds do you know?
I mean, my brother plays Fortnite. My
Your brother's
nephew
12.
Plays Fortnite.
Your nephew is 14.
13.
Basically 12.
Yeah.
We're done. We're just rambling.
I mean, that's what we always do. We always ramble. Peace out, Tribe Scout.